Thank you for listening to the Speaking with Confidence podcast. Give us a review to tell everyone why you love the podcast. You can also download, like, and share the podcast with friends. Be sure to visit formingforpublicspeaking.com and sign up for Forming for Public Speaking course. It's a step-by-step system to help you become the confident and powerful speaker you've always wanted to be. Welcome to Speaking with Confidence, the podcast dedicated to helping you unlock the power of effective public speaking. I'm Tim Newman, a recovering college professor turned communication coach, and I'm thrilled to guide you on a journey to becoming a powerful communicator. I want to thank each and every one of you for your support. It truly means the world to me. Please visit timnewmanspeaks.com to get your free ebook, The Top 21 Challenges for Public Speakers and How to Overcome Them. Today's guest is Therese Miclot. Therese is a leadership development expert with 25 years of experience developing and coaching leaders in global tech companies and small to mid-sized businesses. She is the co-author of The Facilitation Advantage, a book that helps leaders develop the skills to guide teams effectively and with empathy. Today, she coaches leaders on how to navigate complex dynamics, lead authentically, and build workplaces where both individuals and teams can thrive. Therese, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's so good to be here, Tim.
Oh, it's great having you. And, I'd mentioned to you, a few weeks ago that, the pitch that you gave me was probably to be on the show was probably one of the best I've ever seen. And it's perfect. And I think that's really kind of leads into what we're going to talk about, how you kind of lead with value. You're specific in the request and how you can be beneficial in helping others. Is that something that's kind of natural for you, or was that learned behavior from you?
Yeah.
Kind of give me a little bit of insight on that.
Sure. It's very much learned behavior, and I think it's a skill. And I think this is true for all of us who have some sort of domain expertise or subject matter expertise. And the thing I've learned over the years is that if you can step out of your own needs and into the shoes of others, then you're already better at crafting communication or messages because you're not thinking about it from your vantage point. Right. You're thinking about it from your audience's vantage point. And so I always begin or learn to begin as I'm trying to influence or engage with people to think about what are their pain points? Right. Like, what are they trying to accomplish? Because when I can communicate it in a way that addresses those pain points, or their needs or their focus areas, it's going to lead to a better conversation.
Yeah, I kind of approach things the same way. And, there's how we go about communicating those things really can come off very, very differently. Right. Mm-hmm. I like that you're helping, lead teams with empathy. And for somebody like me, I've been told that I'm abrasive, and to me that's not what I'm actually trying to do. So it's sometimes it's word choice, sometimes it's tone, sometimes it's how we actually approach the situation. And so for me, again, it's very much a process and learned behavior. I think people really do come with the idea of leading with value and trying to help people. For the most part, but how we come across in doing that is just really so important, and how that's actually received.
Totally. And I think the skill to lean on, so even when you're coming with that intention, but, like you said, maybe you're coming off as too abrasive or too direct or too indirect, the place to go is listening. And I think it's really easy for us to think, like, when we're trying to show up with credibility and confidence or communicate really well, that we think it's all about talking, right, about getting my point out, getting other people to believe what I'm saying. And I think the counterbalance to that is as important as what you say is how you draw people out, how you hear their point of view first, instead of thinking, the mindset of, I better say something smart, or I better, word this perfectly. Right. And it gets you kind of wrapped up in unproductive and unhelpful thinking.
It really does. And, the listening piece is, I guess, is really one of the most important pieces in communication from my perspective. And, I'm working on one of those, on a reel to put out about, barriers to communication. And one of them is the listening piece.
Mhm.
As we're listening, are we listening, like you said, to find something really smart to say?
Right,
you know
right.
are we listening to wait till it's our turn to jump in, and
Mhm.
or those types of things? The importance of listening, again, is a learned skill.
Yeah.
And I think, especially from a communication perspective, it's often kind of pushed to the side.
Completely. And I think we all have to acknowledge that as humans, we are not great listeners.
No.
Like, it was always true. Now, in today's, day and age where there's constant interruptions and pings and emails coming in, it's obviously gotten exponentially more difficult, but we're just not wired to be great listeners to begin with.
Right.
And so I 100% agree. We have to think of it like a skill that you've got to develop. And in the book, one of the chapters is really on the skill of listening, and we focus on the fact that there's layers to listening.
Yes.
You can listen at the surface, right? And that's just you're listening for the raw facts and data that people are telling you. But often there's what we call deep dive listening. There's so much under the covers that people may not share with you immediately until they know, okay, you're going to listen to me, or I trust you. And so the skill is, how can you listen beyond the surface for what do they value? What are their motivations?
Mhm.
What's the underlying issue? And you will automatically show up as a better communicator if you focus in on deep dive listening.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought up the book, because, and I've said this on this podcast before, I'm a little different. And so when I get a book, I don't start at page 1 and read through.
Hmm.
That's just not what I
Me
do.
either. Yeah.
Oh, this looks like an interesting chapter, and that's right. And then I, go from there.
Uh-huh.
And the first chapter I read was the listening chapter.
Yeah.
And, and I also look at it from maybe some other different perspectives too, with where we're at in society today, with so many people with ADD or ADHD.
Mhm.
And my ADHD is really, really bad.
Mm.
So when I'm really tasked with listening,
Mhm.
at the end of the day, I'm wore out.
Yeah.
How do we, because it's so important, how do you coach listening? How do you get people, especially people like me, or people that have um other things that are tugging at them, to truly focus and be able to do that deep dive listening, because, again, how important it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think of it in come two directions. And this is for all of us that are facilitating
Mhm.
conversations or leading team meetings. And we have coworkers and colleagues with ADHD, whether or not you know of a,
Or not, right.
diagnosis or not. And I think the first thing is that we have to be much more aware of the signals people are dropping all the time. I'll give you a perfect example, Tim. I was on a call this week, and I have, had some people on that call that have disclosed to me they have
Mhm.
ADHD. And the meeting leader was like on their own track. And you could tell they had their agenda. They wanted
Right.
to get through a lot. There's probably too much to cover in the hour that we had, but that aside, I could see my other colleagues, and we were all virtual. I could see them fidgeting. I
Right.
could see them looking around. I could read the body language that said they're uncomfortable right now, or they're trying to process, or you know what? It's been a long time since the leader stopped talking to engage us.
Yes.
And so that's the first thing I would say for all of us that have to lead meetings after meeting after meeting, is we have to be a lot better at recognizing that when we see signals that people are losing focus, we've got to be able to not necessarily call it out directly, but we need to shift what we're doing. And I think facilitation is just all about choices. So when, if I replay that meeting this week, the facilitator could have had choices or taken a different choice instead of just, all right, just stay with me. We have 10 more minutes.
Right.
She could have stopped and said, okay, I've talked a lot and, I know there's a lot of detail here. So what's landing for you right now?
Right.
What are you thinking about? And that might have re-engaged the minds of people that were having trouble focusing. So that's part A. Like, let's help others when we're leading meetings.
Right.
And then for those that do struggle to stay focused in meetings, I think a couple things. One is to speak up. And you can speak up without maybe pointing out that you're having a problem. So it might be that you say, hey, I've got a question. And when you engage, that might help you stay focused a little bit more.
Right.
Or getting what you need when, there's a lot of information coming at you all at once and it's feeling like just a wave of, data.
Yeah. And again, you bring up so many good points, and I could, go down rabbit holes all the time with this. And being a leader, I think it's very, very important that the people that you're leading. You have an understanding of who they are,
Yeah.
what their learning styles are,
Yes.
what I mean, being able to watch them and see how they work and be able to connect with them
Yeah.
on different levels. And I approach it from the idea of a coach perspective on a athletic team. You put people in positions where they're going to be successful. That this person can do this, and then you coach them in different ways. How you talk to them is in different ways, and it really shouldn't be any different in business or your personal life or anything like that. It's understanding who your audience is, understand who you're leading, and what their goals and objectives are, and finding the best ways to guide them to be able to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that for all of us, the message is when you have to lead a meeting and let's say it's more than two people, you should naturally assume that people are not going to be like you in terms of how they receive information.
Right.
So for some of us, and maybe that you'll relate to this, Tim, like you're very direct. You talk in bullets, you get to the point, you're really efficient, right? It's
Right.
about efficiency and speed. And that's great for people who are in the meeting who are like that, who are like, just
Right,
bottom line
exactly.
it for me. Like, I don't need the details, just tell me bottom line. But the chances are good that there are other people in the room or on the call that are like, wait, hold up. How did you reach that conclusion? Like, where's the data to support that? I want to have more information than just, cutting to the chase and getting to the bottom line.
Right.
And, I think of that as versatility, that it's the one skill that we all need in every interaction we have with people. And that is to recognize that, how I like to operate in the world or have meetings or have discussions or have information conveyed to me is not the same for others. And the more you're able to flex your approach,
Right.
the more people want to follow you, the more you keep everyone engaged,
Right.
the more you influence. And even when you don't necessarily have authority, but you have 10 minutes on the meeting agenda and you really got to get people wrapped into your, idea quickly.
Right. And so that's again really good points. And one of the things, how I handle those things is I start right up front. I'm going to give you the bullet points. Here it is. If you want more information, let me know. I can cover it. I can send it to you. I'll give it to you however you want it. If you want me to slow down, tell me to slow down as well. But I've got 5 minutes to get through this, and I'll be happy to meet on the side, whatever it is. But giving them that opportunity. So for the introverts who may not necessarily want to speak up,
Right.
they have an opportunity to, oh wow, okay, they can get their heart rate back down.
Right. And here's another choice, because I think again, the more you have choice moment to moment, the more effective you are at communicating and engaging. Another choice, Tim, would be, I'm not going to give information. I'm going to tell a story.
Yeah.
Tell a story, because story is a way that we make meaning as humans, and it's sticky. So you're the 8th meeting of the day. Everybody's tired. They're exhausted. And And you want to have, make a point that is going to stick and be memorable. Throw out the slide and tell it in the frame of a story. That's another option.
Exactly.
As is like pausing and saying, okay, asking a question to engage people, or saying, just as you did, Tim, like, okay, there's a lot of information here. Here's how I'll share it afterwards if you want more detail.
Yeah. It's again, I think come back to the very first thing we talked about is the whole idea of providing value and giving people what they need, right up front, and bringing their anxiety levels down, or putting them in the mindset of, okay, I don't have to necessarily worry about asking questions or doing this or doing that.
Yeah.
This person or these people that are running this meeting or lecture, what have you, are truly interested in helping, and that's just so important.
Yeah, I think we can make it easier or more difficult for people to engage with us. And it's just choices. And I think like another thing I feel like in my coaching of leaders, I correct a lot is we all have a tendency, if we're presenting or, got an update in a meeting, we say, any questions? Any questions?
That's the worst.
And one of two things: either people are sitting in the room like, please, 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 nobody ask a question. We want to get out of here.
Right.
But it's also just, it's a throwaway question. People don't usually engage with that because it's not curious, right? It's like, well, what are you asking me about? And the weather, that last slide. And I think we could be so much more effective if we asked more curious questions and never said again, any questions?
Any questions? Yeah, I'm so guilty of that sometimes. And you get to the end or even in the middle, right?
Yeah.
It's your time to re-engage.
Yeah.
Catch your breath, and you're thinking, okay, this is what I want to say, and then it comes out as, any questions? I'm like,
Tim, you are not alone.
That's
I
not
bet
what
everybody. It's so easy to do.
It's so easy because
I think maybe the message though is, if you want to be a really good communicator, and most of us focus on, okay, the slides, the details, getting our message straight. If you could spend another 90 seconds thinking about, what am I curious to know from my audience? Right. And don't wing it, because I think when we wing it,
that's it.
The question is, any questions?
Mm-hmm.
But if you spent 90 seconds or 2 minutes, like, okay, what am I really curious about to hear from this group? And how can I formulate a question that reflects that curiosity? I would almost bet that you're going to get more engagement, because people are really noticing that you actually want my opinion. Mm-hmm. You're not just, offering the, throwaway question.
Right. It's again, it comes back to, like you said, preparation, mm-hmm. and being in the moment, and being able to communicate that.
Yeah.
And understand that and I think you agree with this. This isn't easy. This isn't something that just kind of happens. It takes work. It takes practice. It takes repetition. And I think, especially from a leader's perspective, the people that you're leading, if they see that you're trying, if they see that you're that you're improving and
mm-hmm.
you're trying to get better, mm-hmm. they're all in helping facilitate that as well.
Oh, 100%. And I was having a conversation with someone this week about, your vulnerability as a leader can actually be your strength.
Yeah.
Because no one's perfect.
Right.
And I have found that the leaders that I've worked with that will disclose, hey, like, I'm still trying to get better at this, or, it's totally fine if you give me feedback because I'm still trying to learn this.
Right.
Instantly makes me want to follow them more, because they're not intimidating. They're like, of course, like, none of us are good at everything. And it also gives me permission to feel like I don't have to be perfect, because I know I'm not. And so I don't think that you have to give on airs like you have it all figured out at all times.
Right. Because we don't. I don't think anybody does. And I think no matter how good you think you are, you're
Hmm.
going to run into a situation that you've never dealt with before,
Yeah.
and you're going to have to figure it out. And then
Yeah.
I think it's also important to go back and self reflect
Hmm.
and self evaluate,
Hmm.
and also be willing to have that feedback from other people and
Hmm.
own what you did or didn't do.
Right.
You know, I've worked with some people that for whatever reason had just had a tough time owning what they did or didn't do,
Hmm.
you know, and it's a part of that. If you can't do that, that's something that the people that you're leading are going to see and
Hmm.
are going to resent you for.
Yeah, it's a real derailer
It is.
because I think that, a lot of the companies that I work inside, the really the ones with the great culture and where they attract great talent,
Mhm.
they know that what success looks like is not just what you do, but how you do it.
Right.
And those in many companies that have like the best leaders, they see that as equivalent because we probably all know if you worked in, companies, salespeople who are maybe great at hitting their quarterly numbers, but nobody wants to work with them.
Right.
And that string eventually runs out.
Mhm.
And so at least I find, right, that
It does.
eventually,
It,
right, that
mhm,
that it'll catch up with you because you're going to lose good talent. People will do everything to work around you.
mhm.
And the companies that are, I think, really advanced in the way they develop leaders and create a culture recognize it's the what and the how
Yes.
that defines your performance.
Yeah. And you know, I spent the majority of my career in higher ed, and that's what you see in higher ed. There
Mm,
in higher ed, there really is there is no process for training leaders. There's no
yeah.
because generally how it works is you're a professor,
Yeah.
then which and most professors have never really worked in business. They have no training
Hmm.
in how to lead or how to deal with people, any
Hmm.
type of management structure, and
Yeah.
then they're become department chair, and now they're in charge of a group of
Right.
faculty that they have to manage, that they have to evaluate. No training there, and then
Yeah.
they get bumped up into a dean position. Now they've even got a bigger budget, and it's they there's no training.
Though, Tim, there's so many parallels
Yeah.
from academia to, business, because that's been my experience in most companies,
Wow.
particularly those that are fast growing,
Mhm.
is that you get promoted because you're good at
Good.
your subject matter
Right.
expertise. But the reality is that you're right. Leadership is a different skill set.
Yeah.
And you can't muscle it through just because you have subject matter expertise,
Right.
especially when you get, promoted into roles as a team leader or manager, director, vice president. And it doesn't just come with the title.
Right.
And it really is a set of skills that you're right. Whoever taught us to listen, like I never went to a listening class in
Never.
college or,
Never.
you know, we learned it from our, people around us, right? Those
Yeah.
that modeled it either in a good way or a bad way. And there's an easier way to get people transitioning to leadership roles
Mhm.
to be well equipped to perform in this new function.
Yeah, I wish there'd be more of an open, um, being open to doing that, because how much money and time and resources are lost to not doing that
Mhm.
when you could just the amount of money that it would cost and time to
Mhm.
do the training to build people up like that would is minuscule compared to what you're actually losing. I mean, the
Oh,
return on investment of that is huge.
yeah. I've worked with some clients that were able to actually quantify it because they had an attrition problem. So they were
Mhm.
losing good talent. And you can, work with your finance person to actually put a number to what it costs to when you lose good talent and what it costs to replace good talent that you have to
Yeah,
train and the time and all that. And that goes straight to the bottom line.
yeah.
And so I think that in growing companies where leaders at the top are recognizing, what's going to prevent us from growing is leadership ready now.
Yeah.
that becomes the bottleneck.
Right.
And I'm working with a client right now where that's the case, because they grew really fast and they have really strong engineers and technicians and all that, got them to like director level, and they're not equipped to help the business scale and navigate and leading larger teams now.
I read a stat recently, last week or two, that those companies that are spending money on soft skills training and
Mhm.
leadership training are seeing like a 296% return on that investment,
Mm, mm.
which is which is huge. Uh,
That's wonderful to see that it's now, quantifiable.
yeah,
And here's the other thing I think we all have to know, with, AI and the fact that, work is going to change, it's coming, that if you want to future proof your skill set, it's going to be on these like communication skills,
yeah,
facilitation skills, because we're going to have AI agents that will be able to do a lot of the work that doesn't necessarily require the human interaction that
right.
we're going to need. So to me, if you're thinking about how do I get ahead of the curve and keep a growth mindset around, how the world of work is going to be reshaped sooner than
Right.
we know,
Yes.
it's to double down on what you offer, Tim, in the way of communication and, how you build, relationships and collaborate and influence.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't understand how we have gotten to the point where relationships are really not what we're building. They seem to be kind of pushed to the side, and I don't care what industry that you're in or want to get into, or like you just said, in the future,
Mhm,
it's still going to require interpersonal communication. It's
mhm.
still going to be about the relationships that you build, the network that you build, the um, those connections.
Yeah,
That's what's always really going to matter
yeah,
anyway. And that's in business, and that's in our personal lives,
yeah.
all the way through.
Totally. I saw this quote, and I thought of you, Tim, from an academic perspective. But the quote was, "A C plus student with an A plus network will always do better than an A plus student with a C
Right.
plus network."
Right.
And I think it is because that, if you're going to invest in your network, that doesn't mean waiting for when you have to have a job or you need to ask somebody, for a favor. It's being really good at collaborating and
Yes.
connecting and communicating and keeping relationships, growing and afloat.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, you nailed it. And that's something that I would tell my students all the time. And
Yeah.
I would say I would much rather have you be a C student doing these things and showing effort and doing all those
Yeah.
things, and than be an A student and not doing the basic things, because
Yeah.
eventually it's going to catch up to you.
Earlier in my career, I led university relations for a
Okay.
multi-billion-dollar company, and we would go to all these campuses, and we had a big presence and all that, and we would bring very qualified students to our campus and interview, and more often than not, it wasn't just those with the straight 4.0 GPA and perfect credentials, because if they could not interact well and be able to answer questions and ask questions, they would not get an offer. And I think they
Right.
were stunned of like, I did everything right. I got, perfect grades. And the reality is, in a work environment, certainly your ability to demonstrate that can learn fast, and, you know, grades matter. So I'm not saying, don't go to class,
Right.
but I am saying that if it's hyper focused on that and not on what you offer in the way of communication skills, you're missing the boat.
Yeah. And, again, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I've been saying this for years. From a societal perspective, the way we approach higher education is, number one, it's not realistic, it's not sustainable, and we're not doing the we're failing our students, because
Mhm,
the focus is academics, 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 and
mhm.
that's just one of the reasons why we go to go to college.
Yeah.
There's a social piece to it,
Mhm.
right? There's a professional piece to it. There's, all these things that go into going off to college,
Mhm.
and all the pressure is on academics.
Yeah.
And and when we do open houses, especially when I was at, at a smaller school where I was really involved in that,
Uh-huh.
I would tell parents, I would say, look, and other professors and the dean would look at me and I would say, look, academics is important, but you also need to look at, what are the other things that are on campus that your student would be interested in?
Right.
Do they fit in? Do they like the campus? What clubs? What
Mhm.
what locally interests them?
Sure.
And make some of those decisions, because there's so much more to it. And yeah, academics is important,
Yeah.
but it's not the end all be all.
Yeah. I have a recent college grad, and the you know being able to again see it from the academic perspective as he was going through college, but also from the industry perspective. The thing that was like a non-negotiable for our son was internships.
Yeah.
Starting your freshman year, and
Yes.
it can be you are the sweeping the floor at the warehouse, but you're going to learn how to operate inside environments where you have to get things done through others, and it's not based on grades.
Right.
And I'm such a wholehearted believer in, all these industries are going through major disruption. So academics is no different, but it's, I think, on the forefront of seeing how it's going to have to be a bit of a reset on
Yes.
the whole paradigm.
Hmm.
And I think, and as we wait to see all the changes that'll arise, I often think, okay, well, what can I do now? If I'm a student, if I'm a parent, if I
Hmm.
care about someone who's early in their career or in their academic journey, it's like, it's these skills. It's,
Yeah. And I think the way that we do internships has to change.
yeah.
And the way that we do experiential learning from an academic perspective has to change. It's great that they're going out and getting these experiences,
Mm-hmm.
but what's the communication piece? Because we're
Yeah.
so we're so we're so worried about, oh, can you do this skill? Can you do the skill?
Mm-hmm.
But did you interact in that meeting?
Right.
Were you invited to that meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
interact in that meeting? Did you um, send an email to your supervisor? What was in that email? How was
Right.
it structured? And you know have that looked at and evaluated by not only your site supervisor,
Mm-hmm.
but your academic supervisor, and really truly work together. Because again, we're so focused on the task, on the
Yeah.
skill.
Yeah.
The communication piece is left over here,
It's true.
and we've got to change that.
Yeah, and I know a lot of schools have team-based projects,
Yeah.
and it's so cliche, but right, like oftentimes, maybe you had this if you ever had
Yeah.
team projects, Tim. One person feels like they did all the work, and the rest of the people just like rode the coattails. And I was talking to someone earlier in their career, and they said, what nobody told me is that everything at work is basically a group project.
Yes.
I thought I was
Yes.
going to leave that
Mhm.
on campus. And the reality is like, I don't know any company or job where it's not matrixed anymore.
Right.
Meaning you have to work across, functions, levels, layers. And guess what? You're going to run into people at work that have a different approach to you, a different communication style to you. And it's the
A different
number
work
one
ethic.
thing you're going to need to navigate is relationships. It's, careers are like one big group project.
Exactly. And when I would say that to my students, they would look at me like, Dr. You have no idea what you're talking about. I said, okay, I, give it a shot,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
uh,
I think
it's
that's why internships are so
so
incredibly
important.
vital,
Yeah.
because you have to experience it. And I think, this is just true of all of us when we're young, right? Like we have to kind of experience it ourselves before we really like, oh, okay. You've
Exactly.
been saying it, but now I actually get it.
Now I understand it. Now I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that also kind of gets me into the idea of mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
How our self-talk really kind of guides our mindset. Um,
Yeah.
from the work that you're doing, are you finding, even in leaders and CEOs and C-suite folks, that they're having some of the same issues that young professionals are in terms of imposter syndrome, negative mindset, negative self-talk, those types of things.
Yeah, it's universal. That, most of us have a lot of chatter in our head, right? And we speak to ourselves all the time, whether or not we're aware, aware or not. And it has a huge impact on how we show up because our thoughts drive our emotions, which drive our behaviors. So for instance, if I'm in a meeting and I'm saying to myself, don't screw up, you better say something smart, right? Like, everyone's going to figure out you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
Well, then how do you think you're going to feel when you think that thought?
You're gonna screw up.
Yeah, your feelings are probably like nervous, anxious, worried, right? Well, if I were to watch anybody in a meeting when they're feeling nervous, worried, anxious, guess what? They're going to show up with that. Maybe they don't speak at all. Maybe they ramble. Maybe they talk too fast because they're really, really nervous. And so their 5 minutes of the meeting, they just try to run through everything. And then what happens is people just use our behaviors to tell them how to interact with us. And so they might not speak up after you speak up, or now they might be asking you a lot of questions that are poking at, like, what do you really know? Right. And then all of a sudden you leave that meeting and you're like, see, I screwed up. I don't know what I'm doing. And so it's universal, Tim. And whether I'm coaching a C-suite person or someone just entering their career, it is the one thing that I think we all have to start managing the most, because everything emanates from the voice in our head. Yeah. And it's like a billboard on our forehead. We may not think we're saying it out loud, but we are projecting it.
Yeah.
And so if you're not aware of that, that's like the first thing to manage. And I'm not a fan of trying to just fool yourself with platitudes like, oh, right, you can do whatever you put your mind to, because we don't, we can say that to ourselves, but then our next thought is like, yeah, that's not true.
Yes, not true.
And I think it's to learn the skill of how can you offer yourself and catch yourself with thoughts that are not supportive of your goal. And then how can I stay curious about it? So for instance, if your thought is like, don't screw up, they're going to find out you don't know what you're doing. Just pause and say, okay, is that true? Would I say that to my best friend? What evidence do I have that says I don't know what I'm doing? And that can be a 20-second pause. Mm-hmm. And then if you stay curious, then the next thing is, okay, well then what is true and what could help me in this meeting? And so it's not like, oh, don't worry, everything will work out fine. Maybe more supportive self-talk is, you don't have to be perfect at everything. Stay curious. And now your anxiety may not be at a 10, it might be at a 3. And guess what? Sometimes the best value you bring in the meetings isn't like, I have to say something smart. Sometimes it's, I have to ask a good question.
Right.
That's your contribution. To stay curious and like, wow, have we ever thought about this? Or how would this impact that? And then all of a sudden people are like, wow, what a great question. And so I think we can relieve ourselves from this thinking sometimes of like, we have to be perfect or we have to say the exact right thing.
Yeah, let me ask you a question about questions. Because I'm somebody that I ask a lot of questions, and most of the time when I'm asking those questions, it's because I need clarity. It's very rarely ever am I challenging somebody. It's more for clarity. It's more for guidance. It's more for those types of things.
Yeah.
What are some techniques, or because when people ask questions, a lot of times the people that are being asked the questions, they're feeling attacked or challenged for some reason. What are some techniques to for the questioner to be able to ask questions so that the person being questioned doesn't feel attacked?
Yeah. Questions can really come off as, something that we have to defend or deflect. And if you're not trying to do that, as you described, I have a very simple thing you could start to do. And that is add context to why you're asking the question. Meaning, so like you just said, I'm just trying to continuously improve or understand more. That's your motive for asking a question. And if people don't know your motive, then usually they assume the worst.
Right.
So for instance, let's say, just for speed, you ask a question like, why did you do it that way? Why did you do it that way? To others, the way it hits their ears is like, I got to defend why I did it this way. And he doesn't know
Right.
everything about why I did it. Right. And so
Right.
the responses you're going to get feel like they're from a defensive posture. But if you just said, hey, I'm still in learning mode. I'm not looking to point fingers. I'm just looking to improve the process overall. Why did you do it that way? Well, now someone knows, right? Like, oh, I'll probably tell you a lot more as opposed to hold and hide some information.
Right.
Because I know what you're trying to get at. If you don't share context to why you're asking a question, most people will make a wrong assumption about it. And then you get weird answers, or you get like this, defensive posture, and you're like, wait, I didn't want this to go in a negative way. And all of a sudden now feels like, I'm a lawyer,
Exactly.
asking tough questions to, plaintiff.
Yeah. You start hearing the Law and Order, theme in your head. Is there any, is there one or two tips that we haven't talked about that young professionals could start doing now that would benefit them, um, as they're starting their jobs, or they're ready to move up to the next level in management or leadership?
Yeah, I mean, we covered several of them from the book Mindset, Listening, Story. But here's the next one I would give: engaging with presence. So this is the idea that there's something called status behaviors that, when we were, our ancestors were first walking the earth, we were looking for signals from others that would tell us, oh, I should follow them. They'll keep me safe. They'll protect me, right? They'll find a food source, right? We were, before we had communication, like verbal communication, we were looking for signals.
Right.
That has not really completely left our DNA. And so even when you're starting off in your career where you may not have positional power, right? Maybe you're the intern, or it's like you're just a new associate. Be aware of the behavioral and verbal signals you're giving that lower your status. It's not to try to overpower someone. The goal is to try to match status with the people that you're interacting with.
Right.
So for instance, let's say you're about to graduate and you're going for interviews now. How you show up will indicate your status and try to match status. An example of low status would be, well, I've only had one internship. I worked a retail job, but I'm a really hard worker. What you just did there was lower your own status because you pre-qualified your capabilities. Instead, high status would have been, I have an internship experience that has taught me X, Y, and Z that I know I could apply to this job. Right. So now you're not highlighting, your, the fact you didn't have a lot of internships to what you could springboard from your existing internship. But it also is about how concise you speak.
Right.
I have a nephew interviewing for summer internships, and the thing he said to me is like, I when I get nervous and I get asked a question, I ramble. And so a status change for him is to practice how to answer questions concisely.
Right.
Right. So that's going to match status. Making eye contact, even virtually, right? You're making eye contact,
right? How
you're holding your posture. So I would encourage, that's another area to really focus on, because it's sending all these nonverbal signals that indicate, ooh, I should keep listening to you, or I think I'll pass.
Right. That whole interview process is again, I think we put so much pressure on ourselves. And one of the things that I talk about a lot in preparing people for job interviews is you're going to be asked questions that, number one, you should be prepared for. And if you get nervous, the whole thing is, think about it in bullet points. Oh, here's 2 things that you should know about me.
Yeah.
Oh, here's 3 things that I did in that job. And it really kind of gets your brain back into being on point and being succinct. And by
Mhm.
saying, here's two things, whoever's listening is going to say, what, wow, okay.
Mhm.
They're not going to expect, you know, to get, to get the answer 3 minutes later down the road. They're going to say, okay, bam, bam. Um,
That's exactly the advice I gave to my nephew
yeah.
because it gives you a little bit of a track, right? If you
Yeah.
start with there's three things or there's two things, like now you have a little guardrail
Right.
that you put up virtually, mentally for yourself to stay on point.
Right. But it's hard. You know, especially the way that we do interviews now. A lot of times, whether it's interview on the phone, interview like
Yeah.
this, and I tell people they have to be comfortable with no matter what it is.
Yeah.
I'm I'm much better in person than I am on something like this, but we still have to practice. We still have to get
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
And even though for me I'm much better in person, I still have to
Mhm.
practice. I still have to get better, and
Yeah.
understand that um, no matter where we are, we can always get better. Even I would say even the best of the best that we see, the Tony Robbins, the Simon Sinek's, the
Mhm.
Lewis Howes of the world who are doing these things,
Mhm.
and they're the big names. I'm telling you, they're practicing. They're
Oh,
they're,
100%. And
they're
what you didn't see, what none of us saw, was the
right.
20 years of grinding
Correct.
and making mistakes. Like we only see them at the, pinnacle of their career, and you're
Right.
not recognizing all these things they had to learn to do just like we do.
Right.
I think the point you made is brilliant about practicing. It's one thing to like mentally prepare for an interview, but once you now are nervous and you're looking at, another person's face, and now your self-talk is getting all like, oh my gosh, this is so, what if I don't get it? And what if they don't like me? Practicing helps you create the muscle memory to be able to manage through moments where you feel a little anxious. And I'll give you one other tip that actually helped me last week. Most of us now are using AI tools that transcribe our meetings,
Yes.
and this tip like immediately helped me. I went back and I read my transcript of a meeting I had, and I realized how many times I used the filler word
Oh
so
man.
this, so that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I wasn't even aware of it. There's so many tools now that can even help us catch and become more self-aware
Right.
of how we communicate.
You're spot on with that. You really are, and it's funny that you bring that up because when we did the pre-interview, my wife was sitting right next to me, and she said, "Do you know how many times you said right? You would ask a question, you would say right, or you'd make a statement, and you say right." I said, "I had no idea." And
I'll tell you,
and then I pulled those. I did
yeah,
exactly what you did. I pulled those transcripts.
okay.
Goodness, oh my goodness. Uh,
Though, here's where I do think that sometimes we can hyper fixate on it and it's not very helpful. I do think there's a balance because we all use filler words.
we
It's
do.
just how humans talk. And to try to like think, okay, I'm never going to use a filler word is just unrealistic. And most of us don't catch other people's filler words unless it's excessive, right? Like then you might notice, but I guess I think we should all let ourselves off the hook a little bit. We all do it. The name of the game isn't to try to eliminate every single filler word. It's just to not have so much of a pattern where we are using it in every sentence.
Right. And figure out why we're using it when we are using it,
Mhm.
and work on whatever technique that is to reduce them.
Right.
Whether it's silence, whether it's pausing to think, whether it's uh, confidence, whether it's preparation. I mean, there's so many
Mhm.
different reasons why we do it, and there's some things, like you said, they're never going to be completely eliminated,
Mhm.
but how we can actually work on reducing them in the situations that we're using them repeatedly.
Yeah.
Nailing that down. Well, Therese, thank you so much. Where can people find you if they want to work with you?
Yeah. Well, first, find me on LinkedIn. So it's just my name. I post very, very regularly and on, content just like this. The next best thing is to go to thefacilitationadvantage.com. A couple things are there. One is free self-assessment. And I'm a big believer of, when you're trying to learn some of these skills, like don't try to do it all at once. It's overwhelming and we already have very full plates. The self-assessment helps you just pinpoint, oh, I think I could get better at this. So if it's presence, if it's storytelling, if it's mindset, just like how you found the book, it's more of a resource, not to be cover to cover read, but like go in the spot where you feel like, oh, I could really improve and it would have a big impact. From there, you'll also see there's individual coaching. We do kind of targeted workshops on presence or mindset or listening, and then full workshops on all of the facilitation skills.
Yeah, just kind of a shameless plug for you. I really enjoyed the video series that you all did. The pie chart of the different stages.
Mm.
Um, I thought that was, at least for me, it was very helpful and provided a lot of great information.
Oh, thank you. We really wrote the book for non-professional facilitators. I think sometimes when you hear the word facilitate, you're like, well, I'm not a professor. I'm not, a teacher. And what my co-author and I really tried to do is like, no, these are core skills that everyone needs. And if we can break it down into something that feels a little bit more reachable and achievable, then we help everyone become better at, collaboration and communication.
Absolutely. Well, Therese, again, thank you so much for spending some time with the Speaking with Confidence community. I really do appreciate it. I thought you provided some really good value, some great tips for our audience to go out and start doing things now. It's not something that you have to wait a week to be able to start implementing. You can start doing some of these things today. So thank you so much.
Thanks. This was a great conversation.
Take care. We'll talk to you soon. Be sure to visit speakingwithconfidencepodcast.com to get your free ebook, Top 21 Challenges for Public Speakers and How to Overcome Them. You can also register for the Forming for Public Speaking course there. Always remember, your voice has the power to change the world. We'll talk to you next time. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed the latest episode of Speaking with Confidence. Give us a review to tell everyone why you love the podcast. You can also download, like, and share the podcast with friends. Be sure to visit formingforpublicspeaking.com and sign up for the Forming for Public Speaking course. It's a step-by-step system to help you become the confident and powerful speaker you've always wanted to be. We'll see you next time. Take care.